The Subcommittee on Aviation and Space will come to order. I'm quite certain I'll be joined by my colleagues. We have a vote going on, and we just finished work on the Senate floor in regard to the Rotor Act. But we are anxious together, and thank you, Administrator Bedford, for your patience in our arrival, and thank you to all in the audience for waiting for us to be able to convene this hearing. Administrator, thank you for joining us today to discuss the Federal Aviation Administration's plan to modernize America's air traffic control system. I've said this so many times. On January the 29th, Flight 5342, traveling from my home state of Kansas to Washington, D.C., collided with a U.S. Army Black Hawk helicopter seconds before a scheduled landing at Reagan National Airport. And as we know, it killed 67 people. And this tragic accident has forced Congress to quit just talking about safety, and it's forced the FAA to reckon with no longer just sustaining our air traffic control system, but to take actual steps toward modernizing it. I want to acknowledge the families of the victims of this tragedy who have joined us again today. We've said thank you, and there are not words that are sufficient to make you whole, but I recognize the tireless advocacy that has occurred day after day, week after week, month after month on behalf of those you love, and we want to demonstrate that your efforts to memorialize their lives by making it safe for others to fly, safer for others to fly, occurs, that we have a success. I sometimes smile when someone thanks me for my efforts and think, well, that's nice, but could I ever be thanked for my results? And maybe this is a circumstance in which not about thank you to me, but we can have results. While Congress and the public await the findings of the National Transportation Safety Board's investigation into mid-air collision, we're here today to continue that long overdue work of modernizing American airspace. Last year, Congress passed the FAA Reauthorization Act of 2024. It includes requirements to increase controller hiring, modernize ground-based infrastructure, and provides for improved air safety data and cybersecurity standards. In July, this Congress provided $12.5 billion as a down payment toward ATC Modernization. These funds were authorized for technology upgrades, new ATC facilities, runway and surface safety systems, advanced training and workforce capabilities, and other resources that build upon last year's reauthorization. Weeks after that reconciliation bill was signed into law, the Transportation Appropriations Subcommittee, of which I sit, unanimously approved providing the FAA $5 billion, a record amount, to continue its efforts to modernize air traffic control. I was with Secretary Duffy in Kansas on Monday, where he again lobbied me and me to lobby my colleagues that 12.5 and $5 billion is not sufficient, and we take his efforts to heart. Earlier this summer, Secretary of Transportation Duffy announced an ambitious overhaul of America's ATC system. The scale and scope of this comprehensive modernization is enormous. It has and will continue to require an industry-wide mobilization and public-private partnerships to manage and modernize on expedited timelines. To that end, Secretary Duffy and FAA Administrator recently announced a Prime Integrator to manage the brand new air traffic control system project, Peraton, a technology and national security firm. Today, and the timing of this hearing is designed to coordinate with the announcement of that hiring, that contract. And today we'll hear from Mr. Bedford about the progress the FAA has made toward modernization, including how initial funds authorized by this Congress in July have been used, additional resources the FAA needs to execute its modernization goals, and how Peraton will fit into enhancing the safety of national airspace. The FAA has made meaningful steps toward modernization. As we always say, there's much to do. Mr. Bedford, this committee has and will continue to rely upon your agency to be a proactive and responsive partner in these efforts. And again, thank you for your willingness to appear before us today. Modernization is more than just the replacement of physical or digital infrastructure. It also requires modernizing the statutes, rules, regulations that govern airspace and to enable greater innovation and success. Following the deadly mid-air collision on January 29th, I introduced legislation to require military aircraft operating in congested airspace to install ADS-B in and out position broadcast technologies that are critical to keeping our skies safe. And as I intimated when we started this hearing, just right before we convened this subcommittee, the Rotor Act passed to close the gap in air safety. And I thank Senator Cruz and Ranking Member Cantwell. I thank Senator Duckworth on the Senate floor for the work together and all the members of this committee to make certain that we are making the right steps to make air traffic safety the highest of priorities. That legislation, as I said earlier, will amend the National Defense Authorization Act, and I'm certain with the people in this room and others that we and they are committed toward making sure that legislation passes the House of Representatives. So let us soon begin our hearing. Mr. Bedford, I look forward to hearing what you have to say. Before we do that, let me recognize Senator Duckworth for her opening statement.
Thank you, Chairman Moran, for convening what I imagine will be the first in a series of oversight hearings to examine the progress of the massive brand new air traffic control system project. I also want to acknowledge the family members of the American Airlines Flight 5342 crash. We will continue to carry the work that you are doing in terms of advocating forward as well. There's no debate that our aging air traffic control system is in desperate need of urgent repairs and ultimately a comprehensive upgrade. And Administrator Bedford, I want to be crystal clear from the outset. I strongly support Congress providing FAA with at least $20 billion in additional funding for ATC modernization. Now, I understand that the valid criticism of FAA requesting $20 billion in additional funding, despite the agency failing over the past 7 months to produce a comprehensive plan with measurable outcomes and concrete milestones that would precisely map out the next 3 years. However, ATC modernization is the Mount Everest of a program management challenge. And in my view, if we want any chance of success, we don't have the luxury. We simply cannot afford to deny FAA long-term funding certainty. Make no mistake, $12.5 billion taxpayer dollars is a meaningful down payment, but as you know and I know, it's not nearly enough. So Administrator Bedford, I urge you to be relentless and loud in continuing to request critical ATC modernization funds. Of course, even with full funding certainty, success would be far from guaranteed. A great American once declared, in this world, nothing can be certain except for death and taxes. But as FAA undertakes yet another massive ATC modernization effort, we must never forget that one could justifiably add a third item to Mr. Franklin's list. FAA, and that would be that FAA wastes billions of taxpayer dollars trying and failing to modernize our air traffic control system. From the failed Advanced Automation System project born under President Reagan and eventually killed under President Clinton, who couldn't make it happen either, to the incredibly disappointing next-gen effort that's outlived 4 presidential terms, there's a bipartisan legacy of failure in this space. Of course, any ATC modernization effort under any administration will experience schedule slippages, cost overruns, and suffer from any number of known unknowns lurking in the future. It would be foolish to demand perfection from the latest ATC modernization effort, and my ask is simply that FAA plans and prepares to mitigate the problems that will stem from the inevitable turbulence that awaits us. One critical mitigation measures would be to make sure that the $12.5 billion down payment funds on infrastructure that is guaranteed to deliver significant short-term and long-term value. Even if Congress fails to follow through in delivering additional funds, use that $12.5 billion wisely. Here's where controllers and FAA technicians could be the most valuable resource in sharing frontline knowledge that enables management and contract employees to separate nice-to-have upgrades from lives depend on fixing this now crisis-level problems. FAA should also avoid reinventing the wheel. GAO previously testified before this subcommittee that FAA conducted an operational risk assessment of ATC systems in 2023 with the intention of using it to prioritize ATC investment decisions. Unfortunately, GAO also reported, and I quote, FAA did not prioritize or establish near-term plans to modernize unsustainable and critical systems based on its operational assessment. If FAA applies lesson it has already learned, This project holds immense potential to deliver lasting value to the flying public, to air carriers, and perhaps most vital for aviation safety, our dedicated yet drastically overworked and understaffed controller and technician workforce. And on that last point, I strongly urge FAA to add a sixth main category to its current ATC Modernization project: personnel. We must remember that the recent aviation safety crisis was driven by decades of FAA pouring billions into unproven technologies and costly service contracts as it pursued in vain modernization projects with overly ambitious goals and constantly changing requirements. These shiny objects lured FAA into neglecting the health, capabilities, and capacity of our AT system's most important assets, its people. Under presidents of both parties and across multiple Congresses, ATC shed critical expertise and experience, and between 2013 and 2023, FAA only hired 2/3 of the controllers that FAA's own staffing model called for. So today, we find ourselves short 3,500 air traffic controllers, while air travel rises to record highs and controllers are forced to regularly work 60-hour weeks because well over 90% of airports are understaffed. Placing the lives of our constituents in the hands of civil servants who are overworked and utterly exhausted was and remains unfair, unacceptable, and ultimately dangerous. As I warned over the past few years, as near misses piled up and our safety margins got shredded, our luck would eventually run out. The bottom line is that successfully building a brand new ATC system will require rebuilding a depleted and demoralized workforce. I look forward to discussing with Administrator Bedford how the initial BNAC's down payments will first fund critical repairs, procure desperately needed equipment, and enhance capabilities and capacity of our incoming pipeline, training, and throughput system to strengthen our entire controller and technician workforce. And with that, I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Duckworth, thank you very much. Thank you for your cooperation and long engaging involvement in this topic.
Enjoy working with you.
Thank you. I want to also recognize the senator from North Carolina and see if Senator Budd has any comments he'd like to make. North Carolina has a particular circumstance that this tragedy means a lot to him and to his constituents and folks in the state. So, Senator Budd.
Thank you. It's notable, Senator from North Carolina sitting next to a senator for Kansas working on air safety, passenger safety. So we thank you. Thank the families for being here. We note the season and we note what may be going through your minds and your hearts, and we're grateful for each and every one of you, and we realize the tragedy's not in vain for what we're working on today. We look at the Rotor Act, which the chairman was instrumental in passing, the chairman of the full committee and chairman of this subcommittee, and we're grateful for your involvement and your advocacy, and we remember you. 5342 from Wichita to with a Charlotte-based flight crew was notable. But Administrator, we're grateful for your role in what you're doing. We think you're making great strides. We know you're going to give us an update today. We look forward to learning more about that and reading the remarks afterwards. And we appreciate you spending time with us today. Chairman, I yield back.
Senator Budd, thank you for your continued interest, engagement, and support for all these efforts. I want to introduce our witness today. We are joined by the Honorable Bryan Bedford, Administrator of the Federal Aviation Administration. He was nominated by President Trump and confirmed by the Senate this past July. In his role as Administrator, Mr. Bedford oversees 40,000 federal employees. Since his confirmation, he has directed an implementation of President Trump's brand new air traffic control system, in addition to continuing to ensure the safe operation of the national airspace system after the DCA mid-air collision in January. He joins this subcommittee for his first appearance as Administrator. Congratulations on your confirmation. Thank you for showing up for work and doing your job.
Thank you.
I now recognize Mr. Bedford to deliver his opening statement.
Well, good afternoon to the committee. Thank you, Chairman Moran and Ranking Member Duckworth. It really is a privilege to be here, an honor to appear before this subcommittee today as the Administrator of the Federal Aviation Administration. And I sincerely welcome the opportunity to provide an update for you on FAA's work to strengthen aviation safety, modernize air traffic control, and to prepare for the future. I too want to begin by acknowledging the tragic accident involving PSA Flight 5342 at Reagan National. a sobering reminder of why the FAA exists and why I answered President Trump's and Secretary Duffy's call to accept this position. Our mission is simple but critical: protect pilots, flight attendants, and the traveling public by objectively analyzing data to identify risks and urgently acting on the data to mitigate those risks. Immediately after the accident, the FAA did take decisive action, permanently restricting non-essential helicopter operations in the capital region, permanently closing certain helicopter routes, eliminating visual separation approaches, and requiring aircraft to broadcast ADS-B out with limited exceptions. We also reviewed hotspots nationwide where we saw mixed traffic environments create elevated risk, identified those concerns, and took corrective action. We continue to support the National Transportation Safety Board's investigations, including the recent UPS MD-11 accident. These investigations reinforce the importance of constant vigilance and a willingness to re-examine our processes, our assumptions, and our oversight. The FAA remains closely engaged in overseeing how Boeing manages the design, manufacturing, and quality across its programs, including the production system itself. I have confidence in our FAA workforce performing this critical oversight, many of whom continue to carry out their work during the recent government shutdown. The shutdown, of course, placed extraordinary strain on the FAA and its people. Air traffic controllers, safety inspectors, engineers, technicians, and many others who continued to report to work without pay during the 43-day lapse in appropriations. I sincerely appreciate the professionalism and dedication to our safety mission. But let me be clear, well before the shutdown, the FAA was struggling with a shortage of qualified controllers. The shutdown exacerbated those challenges. Staffing triggers reached unprecedented levels, rising from mere single digits prior to the lapse to more than 80 in a single day. Applying the hard lessons we've learned from the DCA accident, the FAA safety team identified controller workload and system demand as emerging risk factors. And as a response to this increased risk, we temporarily reduced operations at 40 high-traffic airports. The connection between controller workload, system demand, and operational risk was unmistakable, and it reinforced the need for the FAA to act decisively when the data demanded it, and underscored the importance of stable controller funding. Hiring and retaining a strong workforce remains essential to aviation safety. Under Secretary Duffy's leadership, the FAA met its fiscal 25 hiring goal, adding more than 2,000 new controller trainees. We remain on track to hire 89 controllers through 2028. We expanded the Enhanced Air Traffic Collegiate Training Initiative to 9 institutions, and we continue hiring inspectors and engineers on the spot, offering relocation incentives to place personnel in critical locations. As we grow the workforce, the FAA must also evolve. The aviation ecosystem is changing rapidly, and the agency must keep pace with innovation while maintaining the highest levels of safety. President Trump's executive orders reinforced the need for modernization, efficiency, and innovation across the FAA. Congress provided a strong foundation through FAA Reauthorization Act of 2024. The act directs the FAA to become more agile, more efficient, and I'm pleased to share implementation is well underway. The FAA is also moving toward an agency-wide safety management system to ensure lessons learned from accidents, incidents, near misses, and other factors are identified and acted upon consistently across the agency landscape. The national airspace system must be renewed. President Trump has articulated a bold vision for a brand new air traffic control system within the next 3 years, and I'm pleased to report that that critical work is well underway. We recently selected an integrator and have compressed a radar and telecom modernization program from 20 years into 3 years. We've already transitioned more than 1/3 of the old copper infrastructure to fiber, and we're deploying our first digital radios and voice switches. One Big Beautiful Bill provided a historic $12.5 billion down payment to support this critical effort. The DCA tragedy and the government shutdown were defining moments for the FAA this year. They exposed vulnerabilities, but they also drove action, and they sharpened our focus. Today, the FAA is a more proactive and more determined agency, focused on fulfilling and upholding its critical safety mission. We owe the American people a system that is safe, modern, resilient, and prepared for the future. We are on the course, and we will continue to support this committee, and we appreciate your support in achieving these objectives. Thank you very much, and I look forward to your questions.
Mr. Bedford, thank you again. I'm anxious, so I want to hear if you could, in some level of detail, tell me how the $12.5 billion that was authorized by Congress to modernize air traffic control system, how has it been spent to date, and what's the prospect for the remaining funds?
Well, thank you for the question, Chairman Moran. If I can just indulge for a second, when I onboarded on July 10th, I was presented with the procurement document to go buy this brand-new air traffic control system. We put it in the trash can the same day. We started on a process of thinking slow and then acting fast. And that think slow process actually gave us opportunity to define the end state of the national airspace system for the future that we wanted, and then work our way back for the critical workflows that we would need to accomplish. Having done that, I can tell you we have increased the cadence on our conversion of fiber or copper to fiber. The FAA had a detailed plan in 2018 to a 20-year plan in 2018 to modernize telco. Through the first part of this year, we had made 900 of those telco transitions. In the last 7 months, we've moved more than 950 conversions. Over a third of the copper has been removed and converted to fiber, and we are well underway completing this program by third quarter of 2027. We are down to our final 3 down selects for radar acquisition, and I believe we will appropriate that money or commit that money by the end of the year. By the end of the year, I expect we'll have $6 to $6.5 billion of the 12.5 actually earmarked and contractually under obligation for telco modernization, surveillance modernization, and digitizing voice communications.
Would you say that last sentence one more time? By a certain date, I want to make sure I heard it correctly.
By the end of the year, we will have $6 to $6.5 billion of the One Big Beautiful Bill committed to modernization.
Thank you. Forgive my skepticism, not about what you said or about you or the FAA in particular, but we all know government projects don't seem to go as planned, and it's difficult to keep a schedule that advances the cause in a time frame as is necessary. Are you doing things differently at the FAA with this project than just what we might call some normal government situation?
Well, thank you. Yes, sir. And I would like to pick up on Chairman or Ranking Member Duckworth's opening comments. You're absolutely right. We need to have a plan. We need to have a strategy. We need to have articulated work streams, measurable deliverables. The good news is we can brief you on that. We have all of that. We have an articulate strategy. We have a mission objectives identified. We have 14 critical needs work packages ready to go, ready to deploy now that we have the integrator identified. So I can tell you I've read the GAO studies, the OIG studies, the OMB studies. I'm right there with you. We cannot do business as usual and hope to have a different result. So we are taking a very different track with modernization.
Thank you. Let me follow up with the appropriations dollars, that $5 billion that I indicated in my opening statement. The Congress passed in our appropriation process last year in the THUD bill, the in FY 26 appropriations, providing FAA $5 billion for modernizing facilities and equipment. How will those funds be used in connection with the deployment of the reconciliation dollars? How do these two things go together?
Well, thank you for the question. And again, I believe as you read many of these audit reports, you would learn the same thing that I have, which is 80% of our infrastructure is considered obsolete and or unsustainable. Of course, the vast majority of that $5 billion doesn't actually go to build new brick and mortar. 85 to 90% of those funds actually go to sustaining, repairing, painting, replacing elevators and HVAC systems and plumbing and roofs. I mean, frankly, we're putting lipstick on a pig. So you may think you're buying brand-new infrastructure with the $5 billion, but what you're buying is sustainment of the old system.
And let me say that while I understand that it's a problem, we need more money than the reconciliation dollars. We also have to patch what we have to keep us going until we get that accomplished.
Absolutely.
And I would indicate that I hope today is another important day in this process of, because the appropriations, it's expected for us to be able to take up the THUD appropriation bill today or tomorrow and move it forward. So you would miss out on that $5 billion if we only do a continuing resolution and fail to do our appropriation bills. So I don't need to tell my colleagues this, but there's just another important opportunity for people to make certain that Congress does its job and appropriates the money and not walk away from the process, or that $5 billion is absent.
Sir, I appreciate the opportunity to provide that clarity because I think it also helps explain why there's such a disconnect between believing that the FAA doesn't do a very good job of these programs. I don't think we've been very transparent in telling you where the money is going. So you may be thinking you're investing in new brick and mortar, and unfortunately, you're investing in sustainment. But the sustainment dollars are critical to keeping the system flying today.
That's why I asked the question. Senator Duckworth.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So picking up on this line of questioning, I have concerns with Mr. Administrator on a focus on meeting a 3-year timeline. I'm all for getting this done as quickly as possible. We need it. But this 3-year timeline strikes me as somewhat arbitrary and unrealistic. And I'm worried that it's setting up any Prime Integrator to fail. I just want to make sure that we're addressing issues of redundancy, resiliency, that we're not creating gaps. So even if the project technically meets the on-time delivery under the threat of non-payment, without stringent oversight, such an environment is at high risk for less stringent quality control, malfunctioning systems, and inadequate time to train controllers on those new systems. So I just want to make sure, yes, it's great that you're putting this timeline in place, but you're going to have to do the significant oversight to make sure that we're not cutting corners. And Mr. Bedford, with an accelerated timeline, coupled with the firings and vacancies across numerous critical offices in the FAA, how will you ensure the current ATC modernization project preserves redundancy, resiliency, and careful transitions to avoid disruptive gaps in capabilities that will emerge when functional systems are sunset and replacement is not yet operational? How are you going to make that transition go as smoothly as possible under this very ambitious timeline that you've put forward?
Well, thank you for your question, Ranking Member Duckworth. I'll tell you, it's something that we've spent an enormous amount of time as we selected between 2 potential integrator partners. This process went through months of evaluation, months of study, game theorying out the entire deployment scenario. So none of the needs package that have been identified, the critical work streams and the timeline, all of that has been vetted through our competitive process. So I believe everyone involved right now believes the target, while it may seem aspirational, it's absolutely achievable. You correctly point out that we need to do that at the same time without sacrificing the current operational reliability of the national airspace system. I think it would be fair for me to categorize that we will not increase the elevation of risk in terms of reliability, but we're still relying on an inefficient national airspace system design. And by that, I mean where we house the compute power, the data power, the operating system capacity is resident in each of our 350 facilities. So phase 1 of the $12.5 billion fixes a lot of those resiliency and redundancy issues, but it doesn't actually get us to the point where we can complete modernization. So just to be clear, this next set of funding that we're looking for that will give us the dollars to actually go completely from analog to digital infrastructure and elevate that compute power out of the facility into the cloud. And that's another reason why we selected Peraton. They've done this for the Department of War. They've accomplished this for NASA. They've got a great roadmap for us to follow for FAA.
So FAA has described the latest ATC modernization project as organized around 5 main categories: communications, surveillance, automation, facilities, and Alaska. As I stated earlier, I believe FAA should add an additional category: personnel. Would you agree that when it comes to restoring effective layers and margins of safety, one of the most urgent challenges we face is fixing the sheer shortage of controllers, technicians, and other important safety personnel?
Boy, I would love to spend a full hour talking about that with you. I can tell you, and you've probably seen, we announced on Monday our Flight Plan 2026. The Flight Plan 2026 goes into the field. It has three primary pillars. The first pillar is people. Focus on hiring the best people, giving them the best training and the best tools to achieve the best results. And we have now identified the critical steps with which we will hold ourselves accountable to delivering on our people, and I would say also starting to restore a culture of trust at the FAA. The second pillar, of course, is safety. And I would love to spend a lot of time today talking to you about how we're going to rethink about safety and redesigning SMS and risk management at the FAA. And then the final piece is modernization, but they build on each other. We have to start, people is the foundation of the NAS. People are the foundation of the National Airspace System. And then we're buttressed by the two pillars of safety and our modernization efforts.
I think we also need to supercharge the training of new air traffic controllers. And would at the FAA consider using a small portion of the ATC Modernization funds to purchase and deploy equipment so that we can strengthen the existing 9 enhanced collegiate training initiative schools? And more importantly, to supercharge efforts to persuade far more academic institutions to sign up to become ECTI schools. I think that that is something that needs to happen. I sort of think of it like the ROTC program, where you don't have to go to West Point to become an Army officer. You can go to any ROTC program across the country. You still have to go to your officer's basic course. You still have to go to Oklahoma and finish, your 16-week course. But at least we're pumping more people into the system, and I do think that it would be worth it for FAA to consider increasing the number of schools and using some of those funds to purchase the equipment so that more schools, whether it's Kansas or Texas or New Jersey or Washington State, can graduate more folks who can then become air traffic controllers.
So I applaud the suggestion. I think we have an opportunity to really lean much more heavily into our community college infrastructure across the country. Our FAA jobs are all across the nation. And if we can get training closer to where the students are, the future of the FAA, I think that'll be helpful to us. Of course, Oklahoma City, that'll be the graduate school, if you will. We're
Yes.
always going to have it. We're blessed to have Oklahoma City, but we can absolutely do more on workforce development. And honestly, to have any hope of overcoming our controller shortages, we need an all-of-the-above strategy.
I do think you should I think you should seriously consider taking some of the initial down payment to establish additional FAA academies. And we should have more than just the one. And we should, you should look at, I'm confident the chairman would love to host a second academy in Kansas, and also the chairman of the main committee in Texas. Of course, we'd love one in Illinois as well. But I think that in places where you actually have established air traffic controller training and aviation schools, additional academies are desperately needed at this time. So please consider that.
I will. Thank you.
Thank you.
We've been joined not only by the ranking member, Senator Cantwell, but now by the full committee chairman, Senator Cruz, both instrumental in efforts on the Senate floor today. I'd recognize the senator from Texas for any opening comments and questioning. And Senator Cruz, if you know how to conduct a hearing, I'll go vote while you do so.
Very good.
Thank you.
Administrator, welcome. In the days following the January mid-air collision at DCA, Secretary Duffy took bold steps to ensure safety of the airspace. He closed Helicopter Route 4 and revised existing memorandums of agreement with DoD, DOJ, and Coast Guard to require ADS-B out usage. I commend the administration for immediately taking aviation safety seriously and taking these key steps to ensure that the DC airspace is safe. Just moments ago, the Senate passed the Rotor Act, bipartisan legislation unanimously supported by this committee and now unanimously passed by the full Senate. The Rotor Act will require all aircraft, military and civilian, to receive ADS-B in signals, something the NTSB has recommended for decades, and the FAA, as recently as 2023 under President Biden, has declined to recommend. In your judgment, how would universal ADS-B in adoption enhance safety?
Well, I hesitate to comment on pending legislation in my current role, but I will tell you as an airline pilot, as a general aviation pilot, as a former CEO of a commercial airline, any additional awareness, situational awareness on the cockpit is a welcome initiative. And as we've discussed many times, was with you, when you introduced the Rotor Act on the dais, along with many family members and the Secretary, and we were supportive then, we continue to be supportive now with the modifications that you've introduced into the legislation, at least as I understand it. So I hope we have an outcome where the general aviation community, which we'll continue to support in our efforts for confidentiality and for portability of systems, I hope we can find broad support for this.
Terrific. I very much appreciate that. There's effectively two options with ADS-B in. Onboard avionics, so that alerts and information is directly available to the pilot, and workarounds like iPad apps, so you can see and hear. That probably works well for a GA pilot, general aviation pilot, but not so well for most commercial or military aircraft. Can you talk about how you might view approval of these workarounds for certain kinds of aircraft?
Well, thank you for the question, Mr. Chairman. I think there's a third element that we need to also consider, and that is the rapid adoption of high broadband satellite-based communications between aircraft and the ground. And so what we have now is an opportunity to integrate the three elements, the plane with an iPad solution with high-speed broadband connectivity to the plane in real time, that will allow us to find ADS-B-N-like solutions that will give us exactly the same type of safety results that you're trying to achieve here today.
So let's shift to air traffic control. So much of air traffic control system is predicated on the limitations of technology from a particular era. Two good examples. The FAA has struggled to close an understaffed TRACON on Long Island that covers the approach for New York City airports. It didn't have to be on Long Island. In fact, the FAA wanted to move it to Philadelphia, but ran into political opposition for years. There are more than 20 air route traffic control centers, ARTCs. They cover traffic at really high altitudes. ARTC's locations and coverage is based on radar from the 1960s. It strikes me that this entire operation is more than a little outdated. How can the FAA best go about facility modernization or consolidation given constant political interference with your decisions?
Well, again, thank you for the question. It's delicate, right? One Big Beautiful Bill gave us $3 billion to examine and look at consolidation of facilities, both TRACONs and en route centers, and I'm confident we'll be able to begin to deploy that investment next year and start to articulate a more refined strategy. But of course, these aren't just facilities, there are people involved here, and we want to be considerate of the people factor as well. We want to retain our critical safety professional workforce with our controllers, our technicians, and our inspectors. But I would agree that we should not carry the old architecture into the future. We do not need to think about the world between TRACONs and en route centers. We need to think about it what it is. It's surveillance centers. And whether they're doing high, low, or all the above represents an opportunity to drive greater efficiency, frankly, and greater safety in terms of how we move aircraft in space more efficiently, more strategically.
And how would you characterize the progress that FAA has made this year with air traffic control modernization, and where do you expect to go next year?
Well, again, thank you for the question, and I think this hopefully won't frustrate you too much. We started with a highly prescriptive 680-page document that was placed in front of me on July 10th when I onboarded. So they were ready to actually get going. In consultation with the Secretary, we both agreed that we should scrap that plan because it represented more of the same. We were going to run the exact same FAA playbook that we'd ran for the last 20 years. So we decided to actually invoke a think slow, act fast mentality. We hired outside legal counsel. We got help to actually create a strategy of what the end state of the NAS should look like, bring back the work packages to the here and now as part of our onboard event integrator. So I think we have an excellent articulable strategy, define work packages and a timeline now where we'll deliver on the promise of modernization, and we'll do it by the end of 2028. In terms of where we're at today, we didn't stop. We didn't slow down. We took what was an existing 20-year FAA telecom modernization strategy that would complete in 2038, and we compressed that into 2.5 years, to be honest. And to tell you whether that's successful or not, I'll tell you, prior to onboarding, we had converted a little over 900 facilities from copper to fiber, and in the last 6 months, we've converted 950 facilities from copper to fiber. So we absolutely can move quicker, much quicker, and we can get the telecom piece done in 2.5 years.
Thank you. I now recognize Ranking Member Cantwell, and actually would ask, would you mind presiding while I run and make the second vote?
Thank you. Yes, sir. Mr. Bedford, the chairman asked, the full committee asked you about the legislation we just passed on the Senate floor, and you said you didn't want to comment on it. Aren't you in support of the Rotor Act that the Senate just passed?
Well, I'm new to the political realm, Ranking Member Cantwell, and I was advised that as legislation is pending, I shouldn't opine for the administration on whether the administration is in favor of it or not. What I can tell you is, both a pilot and a former airline executive, I do support and I applaud the measures of the Rotor Act. I was with you, or with Chairman Cruz on the dais when he announced the Rotor Act. I think the Secretary and I both have pledged our support with modifications that represent our ability to enhance our general aviation compliance, making sure that we're giving them the right tools and processes that we can get ADS-B-like solutions.
I'm just trying to, if you stood next to Chairman Cruz and said you supported the bill, I just am a little confused about what you're saying now, because we did something great today, took a big step, but at the same time, the same people who tried to stick this language into the NDAA, I'm sure will try to thwart these efforts in the House of Representatives. So what I want to know is if the FAA administrator is fully behind the efforts to get this over the goal line and onto the president's desk.
Well, again, I was with the chairman when he announced the Rotor Act and talked about my
As I
support
just said. Okay, do you support requiring general aviation to be equipped with the ADBS-N to improve situational awareness?
So again, I believe as a pilot, greater situational in the cockpit is a good thing for all of us. Many pilots do it voluntarily. There are concerns, however, on confidentiality, how we treat the information, and on the affordability of it. There are solutions today, I'm sure you're aware, where we can provide ADS-B-N-like solutions. And as a clarification, just so we're clear, when we talk about FAA ADS-B-N, that has a very clear definition in the regulation requiring it to be integrated into the flight deck. That's a very difficult concept for adoption.
I'm pretty sure you showed me something different in our office about how general aviation could use a different application.
Absolutely,
So
absolutely.
the point is that we do not want general aviation gutting the Rotor Act or stopping the Rotor Act. And we have lots of different problems to solve, and we definitely want the FAA and the administration's help on solving them. So I want to get to this ethics question because I'm really bothered by the fact that you've missed the ethics deadline to divest from the company that we were also concerned about. Why were we concerned about it? Because Republican had been a key player in trying to get different rules before the FAA. And so you still have not divested from that. So did you divest any of your shares in Republic before December 1st?
Well, I appreciate the opportunity to clarify the record. So under my ethics agreement, I had anticipated being able to complete the merger of Republic and Mesa Airlines and dispose of the shares on the open market.
This isn't about, you didn't take the job
remain-
to make more money and decide when you had to divest. We set these rules up for everybody in the government. You're a very unique individual who hasn't complied. We didn't dig this up. The ethics people came to us and said he didn't comply. So if you're saying you're not complying because you want to make more money, it's like,
No, actually, I think I have complied. I followed the rules. I told the career ethics officers what was going on. They told me I could apply for an extension. I applied for an extension. I heard nothing back from the career ethics officers to the contrary. I acted upon that in good faith. So yes, my intention was to continue to comply based on the advice I was getting from the career ethics officers.
I think they said that OGE denied this exemption because being busy at work was not a valid reason.
Well, I think there was more to it than that, but the reality is I relied on the career ethics advice that I was
They're saying they
getting.
denied the
I applied for an
request.
extension. I was told that the agreement was tolled until we heard back from the
Told? What was the word you just said?
TOLLED, stayed, extended, that I was in compliance. My understanding, I was in compliance throughout. But where we're at today, just to make sure we followed it to its conclusion, the merger has been completed, the shares have been terminated. We're waiting for the new shares to be reissued, at which point they will be divested as soon as reasonably practicable.
I definitely don't think this is what OGE recommended, so this is, it's actually kind of amazing. I do want to ask you about the air traffic controller system and the fact that in the case of the DCAI accident, we've been hearing from air traffic controllers who were ringing the alarm bell. They, seem to be saying that we are hearing alarms and this needs to be fixed, but that didn't seem to be resonating with people who recognized this before the DCA crash. So what are you going to do to fix this kind of input from the air traffic controllers into the system?
Well, thank you for the question. I can tell you, even though I've only been on board with the FAA a little over 5 months, the agency took the accident extremely hard. That was a very difficult situation for the FAA to digest. The loss of a commercial aircraft, loss of 67 lives. Having been on board now, I spent my first 100 days going out across the agency from literally coast to coast up to Quinnipiac, Alaska, visiting all of our facilities, from en route centers to TRACONs to towers. I can tell you that in the agency itself, it needs to reform. We need to change how we think about managing safety at the FAA. We've proposed a creation of an integrated safety office that will take all of this disparate data systems and safety folks from across the mosaic of the aviation ecosystem and consolidate them into one office that will have full responsibility for analyzing the data and making safety recommendations.
So you're going to say now somebody is going to listen to air traffic controllers on a regular basis. They'll have an input into a specific office. That information will be digested and presented both up and down the chain?
I'm suggesting that the way the FAA has been designed is very siloed, and each one of those silos contains some small perspective on aviation safety that doesn't talk well across the different lines of business. So by deconstructing safety out of the silos and putting it into a consolidated office tasked specifically with looking at the entire aviation ecosystem, from certification to flight standards to enforcement to rulemaking to obviously the ATO, all of those things will now be integrated into one office.
Okay, but I'm asking something specific because we learned this very well from the MAX situation, that you have to have line employees being able to communicate up and that information being digested by lots of managers above them, as opposed to having that shut down. And what we wanted to make sure happened in the Boeing case is that that information wasn't precluded from being shared with the FAA. And the reason is because the FAA's job was oversight, implementation of rules, and understanding problems before they became bigger problems. And I just want to mention, I mean, you said it was hard on the FAA. It's very hard on these families. They're here. The Lilly family's here. Amy Hunter's here. Laura Ogend is here. It's hard on them. And what we have to do is get this right. So this is just a really basic question. You believe that the employees should be able to report into a system without intimidation by their manager, and that information be digested, like we heard 1,500 alarm bells go off for a long period of time about the route.
Well, every week when I address the team, I make sure that they know that they can reach me. They've got my emails. They know how to get a hold of me. So yes, to answer your question, of course, frontline employees should absolutely be able
Okay,
to.
well, usually you name that program and then they're inputted and then that is digested somewhere. And so that's the question I'm asking.
If somebody
So
sees something, they should say something.
in a formalized system. We have all these reports that we get that basically is an IG who comes in later that says that information didn't get read or shared. And then what happens, believe it or not, the public should know this, before the IG even gets to publish their report of their findings of bad problems, then they send it to you, the agency, who then cleans it up before then it gets published. So that the day the report gets published from the IG about all the problems, basically the agency says, oh, we already fixed all that. And then it leaves us, the policymakers, here trying to figure out whether it really did get fixed or didn't get fixed. So anyway, I do appreciate that you are at least willing to say that SMS needs to be a system-wide for the whole agency. I do appreciate that. Thank you. I think Senator Capito, I don't know if you're chairing or I'm yielding to you.
I don't know what I'm doing. but-
You're,
No, I do know what I'm doing.
Senator Capito, I'm sure you're taking the gavel.
I am. Thank you, Mr. Administrator, for being here and for your service, too. You know, we're only as strong as our weakest link, as we know, and there's a lot of emphasis, as there should be, on the larger airports, and it won't surprise you to know that I'm going to focus on the smaller airports, of which, of course, my state, you know, is all small airports. And to modernize the air traffic control system, we've recognized that there are need for the critical system updates. So in the smaller regional airports, in a state like ours, how are you ensuring that regional airports are getting the necessary attention in the modernization efforts? And because you talked about antiquated systems, and in here you said some of the radar systems are decades old. I mean, in certain terrains like where I live, that can be very dangerous. So what can you tell rural America in terms of your airport's going to be as safe and as modernized as Dulles or LaGuardia or something?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for the question. Of course, we need to elevate modernization across the board, not just big airports versus small airports. And in fact, when we take out our technology for testing, which we're doing as we speak, brand new digital radios, brand new digital voice switches, we actually go to our smaller airports where we have better controls, frankly, and less stress. So we actually start modernization from the small and work our way to the top. Mm-hmm. So I can assure you that our regional airports are going to be well maintained as we go through the modernization.
Well, I mean, I'll just give you an example. You know, at some of our airports, for instance, on the lighting systems, you know, you need incandescent bulbs. You can't get them anymore that are sufficient to our runways, or you have to go get a part because it's so old. You have to go to eBay to get it rather than on the market. I mean, are you finding this system wide, and is the money that we gave you in the one big beautiful bill going towards these kinds of things, or is that step two?
Yeah, so the money was allocated in many different buckets. One of them is, in fact, surface runway surveillance. I think Ranking Member Duckworth would know this, that when I was visiting the Chicago Tower, we normally have 2 of our ASDX surface radars operational. We were down to 1, and that one was down to its final channel, all due to a lack of supply chain, no parts. We actually manufacture many of these parts now, and when we can't, we cannibalize them off of other systems. So with one big beautiful bill, we are purchasing those new radar systems, and they will be deployed starting in the second quarter of next year.
I want to ask you about the network outages and connections. Our colleagues here have already, I think, been on this, talked about this, the telecommunication connection redundancy. We've seen stoppages in certain airports, and it's critical for safety. So can you explain how the FAA will oversee, I think it's Peraton, did I get that correct?
You did.
Their effort to replace our legacy telecommunications networks, and what are the timelines for these replacements?
Well, thank you for the question. If I can just digress for a second, because I
Certainly.
think the rest of the committee needs to understand this as well. When we talk about modernizing telco, most people think about moving from copper to fiber, going, from analog to digital. And that's all true, but there's another element of modernization that we aren't doing today. The second round of funding that we're asking for will be critical to get that done, and that is essentially to re-architect how the fiber is laid. So for example, Dallas-Fort Worth, we had a significant outage in
Right.
our TRACON there. That system theoretically was modernized but the architecture of that system had not been modernized. So there's really a two-step process here. So even in places where we're replacing copper with fiber, I just want to be transparent that there's still another step that has to happen to get from analog to digital, which will drive the resilience and our capabilities to increase bandwidth in our facilities. So it's an important distinction. But as far as the timeline on the telco copper to fiber, it will be completed by third quarter of 2027. We're 35% of the way through now.
Okay, thank you. Let me ask you something that always comes up, and that's the number of air traffic controllers, difficulties with keeping the numbers up enough to be sufficient, to be able to keep people off double shifts and all that. How are you doing on that? And have you made any significant changes that you see on the recruitment aspect? Because we know also you can't just all of a sudden jump in the seat. It takes 18 months, 2 years before you can actually grasp the system enough to be entrusted with the care of the system. So where are you on the numbers and on the employment at air traffic control?
Thank you for the question. Yes, so Secretary Duffy supercharged controller hiring back in spring. We in fact met his goal of hiring 2,000 trainees. Those trainees went into production. The trainees have a high failure rate or high washout rate. And in fact, during the shutdown, we lost, 400 or 500 of our trainees that just sort of gave up during the lapse. Even though we kept the school open, I think the thought of not being paid was enough to frighten them away. I can tell you we've increased the number of certified trained controllers, not by a lot. We went from 10,600 to 10,700. We've got 1,000 more trainees in the pipeline than we had a year ago. So, but as you point out, it's a 2 to 3 year full training cycle to get them through the academies, through our enhanced collegiate training programs and actually deployed. Furthermore, I can tell you we have identified numerous opportunities to improve the curriculum structure and the training and how we move controllers through that to, I think, significantly shorten the time to get to proficiency. And I think that we've identified things that we are self-inflicting in terms of how we schedule our controllers that are leading to a lack of productivity.
Yeah, and burnout too, probably. Well, thank you for your service. Thank you for answering my questions. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Senator Capito, thank you. The senator from New Jersey. Senator Rosen.
Well, thank you, Chairman Moran, Ranking Member Duckworth, and thank you, Senator Kim. I appreciate it. And this is a perfect segue because I want to build on what Senator Capito was talking about in our workforce pipeline, because we have a military to commercial aviation workforce pipeline that I think we should be potentiating. So I'm going to talk about how can we make it easier for people with military aviation backgrounds, including those with training comparable to air traffic controllers, to enter the commercial aviation workforce. You know, Nevada plays a major role in national security and aerospace sector. We're home to Nellis Air Force Base, Nevada Test and Training Range, Creech Air Force Base, and Fallon Naval Air Station. Numerous other equities engage in aviation. Nellis is 7 miles northeast of Las Vegas, which covers more than 14,000 acres, and its ranges provide 15,000 square miles of uninterrupted airspace for flying operations. An estimated 12,000 military and civilian personnel work at Nellis, making it one of the largest employers in southern Nevada. So Administrator Bedford, while individuals working as military air traffic controllers may be able to bypass some portions of FAA's ATC certification process to become civilian controllers, they would still need to undergo additional training. So can we talk about how we might leverage this pipeline? You have people who've really been in the mix of some very heavy training and lots of good experience. How can we break the barriers down to bring them into the commercial workforce?
Well, thank you for the question, Senator Rosen. As you may be aware, many of our controllers do come from a military background. In fact, our chief operating officer is a former Navy guy. So we welcome that experience. We welcome that discipline to join our team. If there are barriers of entry, I'll confess I'm not sure what they are, but I'd be happy to work with you.
Perhaps you could report back to this committee, because our veterans, our veterans really want to be able to do this, and so maybe you can take a look at it. Come work with our team to talk about the barriers. We can talk with some of our folks at Nellis and see what they're thinking as well, because I think we're missing out on a really great opportunity for our veterans to come into really important jobs in airline safety and aviation safety. They've been doing it for our men and women in uniform, and there's no reason that they can't take that pride of ownership and continue to do that for the rest of the country. So we can work on that offline. I also want to talk about non-traditional air vehicles, because as you're aware, the national airspace, it's becoming increasingly complex and crowded. More aircrafts take to the skies, drones, electric vehicle takeoff, vertical takeoff and landing, other advanced vehicles. We're going to really need that nimble, efficient, and responsive FAA that's prepared and trained to deal with the ongoing technological advances that are occurring daily in the aviation industry. So we talked about workforce as far as air traffic controllers, but how are you going to ensure that the FAA has a robust workforce overall, the technical capacity, the institutional focus needed to help the aviation industry stay on the cutting edge of innovation, being a global leader, and ensuring that safety?
Wow, thank you for that. That's a lot in there.
It's a lot, but I mean, but there's a lot going on. Every day there's a new kind of drone, a new kind of thing happening in the commercial space. And so how do you respond to that? How are you going to bring people up to deal with that and even look forward to keep our airspaces safe? That's really the end game here, right?
Well, you're probably aware that President Trump has issued numerous EOs to unlock drone dominance, to create EIPP,
So where are we going to get the workforce to be sure everything's safe?
Well, it's a great question. So the workforce tools do need to modernize, and that's part of what you're going to get both in the $12.5 billion One Big Beautiful Bill and in what we would hope for is additional funding to complete modernization, where we can operate in a strategic versus a tactical manner.
So who do you think to that regard, if we get the money, but who's going to set forth, even if we have commercial companies doing some of the training, public-private partnerships, who's going to set the template or the requirements per se, that the standards, if you will, that these schools or training facilities need to work on, need to be thinking about? And this is what I'm actually asking you. You need to set those frameworks. I know I'm running out of time, but it's important to think about that, because the last thing we need is somebody delivering your package for Christmas and it is going to interfere with something else in the aviation space.
I want to make sure most Americans understand through our BV loss rules, we are absolutely anticipating how we're deconflicting all of that airspace.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Senator Kim?
Thank you. It's great to see you again.
Likewise.
I just want to build a little bit off of what Senator Rosen was just talking about. You know, a year ago, we had a lot of confusion in New Jersey about drones, about whether it was what was true, what was not. We didn't really have an ability to deconflict this, especially not in real time. And it caused a lot of panic. And I guess I'm just trying to think through a year later, like, are we any better off? And I'm not really sure. I mean, when you and I, we went out to the FAA Tech Center down in Atlantic City, we saw some really interesting tech that was very nascent but growing about the ability to track unmanned vehicles, aerial vehicles, and aircraft. I guess I just kind of want to get a sense from you, just what else do we need in terms of technology? How do we get that out there, deployed and proliferated to meet the scale? Because I agree with you. Look, this technology is strong. We want to make sure we're dominant in this, but it's also going to create a lot of confusion and complexity. What else do we need to do from not just a workforce side, but a tech and innovation side? Do you feel like we're getting there?
Well, thank you for the question, Senator Kim. I do think we're getting there. I think there's more work to be done. Our BV loss rules will be very constructive, working with industry. We're not telling industry how to do it. We're partnering with industry on how to figure out how to do it and make sure we as regulators and compliance personnel understand it and can actually manage this process safely. But I want to tell you, it's also a concern for Department of Defense, Homeland Security, Department of Justice. So detection, threat assessment, and mitigation are three additional principles that we're very focused on.
Yeah, the Joint Military Base and other installations in my state, they had no idea what was going on, let alone have equipment to be able to mitigate some of those. So, I'd love to continue working with you on this. I think that the Tech Center and elsewhere around the world are doing great innovation. I want to just kind of build off of what others were saying and just get an update from you just on the Newark side of things. We've had a number of conversations about some of the challenges that we face there. I've been impressed and grateful for the attention and efforts to try to strengthen that up, both in terms of upgrades as well as staffing at the Philly TradeCon in particular. But I guess I just wanted an update for you so I can bring back to my bosses in New Jersey. How are we doing? What else needs to be done? And what's the timetable?
Well, thank you for the question. Honestly, I don't think our work will ever be done there. I mean, staffing is going to be something that we're going to be focused on, I think, for the remainder of my term of office. I don't think we can rest, right? We'll have to keep our foot on the accelerator.
Especially as you're saying, it takes 2 to 3 years to be able to get up to speed, and then each region, each area, they need to be proficient in that space too.
There is good news. We've seen a lot of the telecom stability has been overcome, so I feel like we're on better footing there, but I want to go back to the previous caveat I made that what we're doing is we're replacing copper with fiber. Yes, it's more reliable, but we have not yet re-architected how that fiber sits in the ground and its connectivity. So we still have some single points of failure that we're having to work our way through as we identify and mitigate those. So I do think we've made a lot of progress. We're not stopping. We still have a big upgrade cycle to do, both at Philly C and in the tower in Newark.
Am I able to go back to my bosses in New Jersey and tell them that the blackouts on the radar and other comms issues that we had earlier, that's not something we should expect anymore?
Well, again, the NAS is still analog. Even though we're putting in digital equipage, it's still being converted to an analog signal, so the surveillance system. So as much as I want to tell you the system is stable compared to where it was this summer, it's still at risk of the fact that we're dealing with 50-year-old radars.
One other thing I want to just get on your radar is, I've been hearing from my constituents, especially those up by New York City, up in North Jersey. They're telling me like they're getting upwards of 170 helicopters going over their head over the course of a given day. Much of that non-essential, there's a boom in tourism and whatnot. They have no problems with the law enforcement, with medical needs and emergencies, but they were just asking me like, is there anything we can do on this front? And I know it's not an issue that every corner of the country faces, but it's seriously disrupting their lives, their ability to be able to just live the lives that they want. And I guess I want to get a sense from you, what, if anything, are we able to work on? And is there ability for you to commit to working with me to try to figure out an appropriate way forward?
Well, I wish I could offer you a lot of hope on noise. I think there are 2 ways we can help with noise. First is modernize the system where we can keep aircraft at a higher altitude and allow them to do power-off descents into the airspace and to landing. That will significantly increase capacity and reduce noise impacts in our community. I think the hope for helicopters, frankly, is in the future of advanced air mobility. Those airframes are remarkably quiet, and if we can replace helicopters with, forget even if they're vertical takeoff and lift vehicles, even conventional electric vehicles will be significantly quieter in the airspace than what we have with conventional helicopter lift.
Okay, well, look, I'd like to continue this about not just that on the tech side, but what flight paths. I mean, especially after the crash that we had in the Hudson, there's a safety concern that many are facing. So if you don't mind, I'd love to be able to follow up with you.
I would love to work with you on bringing out our Mars technology as we think about New York airspace as an airspace system, not 4 separate systems, where we can drive greater efficiency that I think would also benefit noise in the market.
Okay, thank you, and I yield back.
Yeah, I was with you till you wanted to get rid of helicopters. So, Senator Hickenlooper.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Welcome back, Mr. Bedford. You were talking about the trainees, the shutdown being enough to scare 400 or 500 of them out of their job. They probably wouldn't have been very good air traffic controllers if that relatively small amount of stress was going to disconcert them such. Anyway, during that shutdown, Denver Airport actually wanted to use its own funds to pay air traffic controllers who were dutifully working through the shutdown. And I think a lot of the senators strongly supported that. And we've seen other proposals from this committee as well, which would allow for the ATCs to be paid during a shutdown. During this shutdown, controllers were not only working long hours, but they were also sometimes taking on additional jobs just to make their rent or get through their monthly budget. Do you think it's important to reduce these kinds of outside stressors for, those dedicated workers who are coming in, even though they're not getting paid? They will get the back pay, but they're not getting paid. And they're in charge of not just public safety, but the safety of our national airspace system. Do you think it's useful to reduce those outside stressors?
Yes.
And so what's your sense on whether airports should be able to take on, hopefully be repaid later when we get out of a shutdown, but they're willing to go forward and out of their own pocket pay the ATCs? Shouldn't they be allowed to?
Well, so the air traffic control system is just that. It's a system. Having one control tower staffed and the rest of them unstaffed doesn't get us very far because planes don't generally fly in circles. So what we need to do is think about a solution that solves the problem writ large. So we look, if the shoe were on the other foot, if I were back in private industry and you got word of the fact that I was actually requiring employees to come to work and not paying them, I'm pretty sure you would haul me in front of this committee and dress me down. So I would strongly encourage us to figure out a way to not shut government down, but that's me as a private citizen and a taxpayer, not as the FAA
I think all of us
administrator.
here probably agree with you. Northern Colorado Regional Airport, which is up in Fort Collins, kind of between Fort Collins and Greeley, was piloting a remote tower through the end of 2024. The bipartisan FAA reauthorization last year directed the FAA to create a program and publish milestones for a remote tower system. And these included establishing requirements, safety protocols, approval processes for the design as it goes along, testing, operation of remote airport towers, including talking to stakeholders, making sure everyone's part of it. What progress has the FAA made on this mandate? So when and where can we expect to see more remote towers in operation?
Well, thank you for the question. We have the digital tower, remote tower sitting in our tech center. It's been undergoing safety assessment and evaluation for the better part of a year. I saw it right after I onboarded in August, and I was just at the tech center again 2 weeks ago. Frankly, pushing to get this work done. They're on a pathway to certify the device now, I believe, by the end of the second quarter. I'd love to see us accelerate that. We have a deployment in Bartow, Florida right now, where they've purchased the system on their own, and we're allowing them to operate in parallel. So they keep their tower manned, but they're also manning their remote tower to see if we see any latency or other issues that would give us concern. We have a second deployment, I believe. Florida has bought a second one for Winter Haven. We've identified where we think we would be able to roll out digital towers, both as a supplement to our current tower as well, as an additional safety supplement, if you will. We have poor lines of sight. Rather than building taller towers, we might be able to use this technology more cost efficiently to enhance our airport surveillance. So I'm excited about it, and I want to see us get this deployed just as soon as
I'll
possible.
assume that you're saying sometime in this coming year, we should look at some move forward.
Yes, you have my commitment on that.
Good. Now I want to talk a little bit about what we call essential air service. We've discussed. In Colorado, the Essential Air Service Program is I guess it's not too much to say it's an economic lifeline for some of our rural communities. Places like Cortez, Alamosa, Pueblo.
Gunnison.
Connects them to Denver, as you know. During the shutdown, we saw EAS funding nearly dry up multiple times before finally being included in the continuing resolution. But obviously, living CR to CR is not a viable way to operate. What is the FAA doing? Now, until we can get past shutdowns completely, what is the FAA doing to ensure that the Essential Air Service continues to serve its purpose of connecting rural communities to urban hubs?
Well, thank you for the question. I want to make sure I stay in my lane here. I believe EAS is under the purview of the Department of Transportation, not the FAA. But I can tell you as a as a 35-year operator in a lot of those markets in Cortez, Pueblo, Farmington, Gunnison, Sheridan. I get all of that stuff, and that lifeline is critical, absolutely. I think one of the things that is going to usher in an absolute change in our connectivity is advanced air mobility. We can finally find a vehicle that is cost-effective, it's the right size, has the right operating parameters. So really excited about how we can actually reduce the need to have an economic supplement, but allow the market to actually address the need, and with better frequency, better customer service. I think advanced air mobility is the key to unlocking that future.
I agree, and lowering that cost as you're describing, that's exactly point on, so that they don't need that subsidy.
Absolutely.
Thank you. I yield back to the chair.
Senator Hickenlooper, thank you. I would highlight that in March, this is legislation I've introduced in previous years as well, but in March, I introduced legislation to allow the FAA to withdraw from the Airport and Airway Trust Fund monies necessary to keep their operations functioning during a shutdown. And I'd welcome any support and
Sign me up.
joining with you. Thank you. Thank you for letting me market this effort. Senator Markey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Administrator Bedford, at your nomination hearing, you told me, quote, "I will follow the ethics agreement that I've signed with the Office of Government Ethics, and that ethics agreement requires you to divest your holdings in Republic Airways within 90 days of your confirmation." And you were confirmed back many, many, many months ago. So it's been 5 months since your confirmation. Senator Cantwell asked you earlier, but I will ask again, because in answer to her question, you said that you are in compliance. So yes or no, have you divested your holdings in Republic Airways?
Well, I do appreciate the opportunity to add more clarity to it. I continue to comply with all of my ethics agreement requirements, especially the recusals that are in force. I've briefed the entire FAA front office team, political team, and the career ethics officers about the agreement.
The question I'm asking is, have you divested from Republic Airlines? Okay, it's a very simple question, and you said at the confirmation hearing that that would be what you were going to do. Have you done that?
So again, just to make sure we're level set here, I followed the advice I was getting from the career ethics officers to seek an extension due to the fact that the agreement to merge Republic and Mesa was being delayed.
So you received an extension?
I applied for the extension at the advice of the career ethics officers, and
Did you? No, I understand
I
that.
didn't get a no.
Did you get an extension?
I was not told I did not get an extension.
Did you get an extension?
Well, I've learned after this hearing was scheduled that the OG decided not to grant that
You
extension.
have not been granted an extension. So
By the time that extension was, or that information was communicated to me, the merger had in fact closed. The certificates have been canceled, and I am now in a position where I have to wait for them to be reissued, at which point they will be divested.
You have not divested from Republic in your 5 months on the job, and you have jurisdiction over that airline.
Hence the
And so-
need for my
and
recusal.
that's completely unacceptable because you were looking for an extension anyway. You should have just divested. So you came before this committee and you testified that you would follow your ethics agreements. And you have contradicted your testimony and you've broken your promise to the American people. And I understand that you requested a 60-day extension from the Office of Government Ethics to divest from Republic Airways, but you requested that extension on the last day your divestment was due, on October 7th, and you did not receive an extension. You didn't receive the extension. So, Mr. Bedford, yes or no, did you make any effort to divest from Republic before the date that you asked for the extension and the divestment was due? Did you ever seek to divest before that request for an extension?
I worked very closely with the career ethics officers at the department to make sure I maintained compliance with my ethics agreement. And the advice was to seek an extension, which I did. And I did not hear any response back from the OEG until first week of December.
Well, the answer is no. You requested an extension at the very last second, and now you want to throw up your hands and say, it's not your fault, but.
Well, that is why the
not only was
recusals remain in place, sir.
Your request was denied, but even if it had been granted, those 60 days have already passed as well. This is 5 months ago that you were confirmed. So even that 60-day extension would have already expired, okay? And you still have not divested. So that is actually an egregious violation of your agreement. So Administrator Bedford, when do you intend to comply with your ethics agreement and fully divest from Republic? I would like a date that you are going to be in compliance with your ethics agreement. What's that date?
So as I sit here today, the shares have been terminated, and I'm waiting for the shares to be reissued under the new organizational structure. Those shares, as soon as they're reissued, they'll be sent to my broker, and the broker is instructed to sell them as reasonably practicable.
Well, what does that mean? Does that mean a year from now?
Well, I don't know when the shares will be issued, sir, so I can't give you a specific
So
date.
5 months have gone by, and you haven't divested yet, and you have no idea when you will be divesting in the future. The merger between Republic and Mesa closed on November 25th. So you could have sold before the closing date and avoided any issues with share certificates, but you didn't do that. And shareholders tend to approve mergers because they increase shareholder value, not decrease it. So is your recusal to comply with your ethics agreement at all motivated by the Republic-Mesa merger?
I'm not sure I follow your question.
Well, I think it's pretty simple, what I'm saying. That merger.
I am recused from all things, both Republic Airways and regional airline industry.
Right, but did you think that maybe it would be appropriate for you to divest before that merger?
Sir, I followed the advice I was getting from the career ethics officers. I played it right down the fairway, completely transparent, open, honest about where I was at, what I was trying to accomplish. I accepted their advice. I followed their advice. And now I'm in a situation where the shares are canceled, and I can't sell them even if I wanted to today.
Well,
But as
your
soon as they're
refusal-
reissued, I will divest.
Your refusal to divest your
Thank you.
Republic
I'm
shares
gonna-
and the timing of this merger are just a coincidence. I think that that ethics agreement was not a suggestion. It was something that you had to comply with. And obviously, there are going to be more and more conflicts that show up the longer that you stay in conflict with the ethics agreement. So I thank you, Mr. Chairman, but I expect you'll be back at this hearing again, and you still will not have divested, and it's just unacceptable.
Senator Duckworth's recognized.
Thank you. I'm gonna continue on this question line. So my understanding is Republic and Mesa, as my colleague has mentioned, merger was completed November 25th, but your ethics agreement required you to have divested by July 9th. So that was quite a ways before the merger was completed. Why is the merger relevant to your decision? I mean, you brought this up. You brought up the merger. Why is it relevant to whether or not you divested before July 9th?
What's the July 9th date again?
That was your ethics agreement required that you divested by July 9th of 2025.
Oh, I didn't onboard to the FAA until July 10th, so I'm not sure where the July 9th date comes from.
Well, even then, 60 days when you are onboarded would still get you before the November 25th, 2025 merger date,
That's correct, which is why I sought an extension from the.
on the last day.
Well, I've been
waited
working
till
with
the
the career
last day.
officials, and.
So you're
this-
blaming the career officials.
No, I'm saying that there was transparency here. There was no attempt to hide anything.
Okay, well, now that it's happened, if you had sold your Republic shares on July 9th or 10th, the share price would have been $14.40 per share. Today, it's $19.94. Will you forfeit any profit from your failure to comply within the 90-day deadline?
I'm not sure where you're.
When you eventually sell, if you eventually do divest, if the shares have increased in value since whenever your divested deadline was, will you forfeit those profits? Give that money back to the taxpayer, do something with it. Because you're taking advantage and you're making more money off of
My
it.
broker is instructed to sell the shares, as soon as he reasonably can, once the shares are reissued.
Right, but I'm asking you about the profits. If you had sold, if you had sold when you were supposed to, the shares were worth $14.40 per share, At this current point in time, they're worth $19.94 per share. So that's a $5 per share
Well, I
profit.
can't deal in hypotheticals. It's possible the share price could have gone down.
Okay. Well, they're up. If you make a profit, what are you gonna do with the profits? I mean, you were supposed to divest, and you haven't.
I followed my recusals, I followed the ethics agreement, I worked with the career officials to seek an extension, and unfortunately, due to their lack of response, I'm in a position where the shares don't exist to sell.
But you
If
could
the
have
shares
sold
are
them.
reissued, I
You
will
could have
sell
sold them without asking for you could have sold them when you promised us that you would have.
I've been completely transparent with the ethics officers, including how the agreement came together. My intention was always to complete the merger and to sell the shares in the market. That was my intention coming into government. That
Right, but
intention
my
hasn't
point is
changed.
you were supposed to divest within 60 days and you didn't. So as you were getting to day 56, 57, 58, 59, you can't blame this on the ethics officer. You're the one who chose not to call your broker and
not-
say, sell, I have
Not
60 days to
attempting
sell.
blame
And
anyone, I'm simply attempting to tell you what actually transpired.
so you chose not to make the decision to call your broker to say, it's day 59 or it's day 60, sell the shares. I made a promise to the United States Senate
There's no
that I would
market to
divest
sell
of.
the shares, it's a private company. There's no market to sell the shares.
I think you're going to be coming back before this committee.
I'm sorry?
I think you're going to be coming back before this committee to answer these questions. I yield back,
Well, I
Mr.
do welcome
Chairman.
your oversight, thank you.
Mr. Payton, I don't know what I missed. I'm sorry, Peraton, I missed. I'm not calling, what I want to talk about is Peraton. Mr. Bedford, I don't know, I may have missed this, but Peraton will be responsible for certain elements of the administration's overall modernization goals, from replacement of telecommunication systems to radars. What's the Peraton's contractual responsibility for those programs? What are they required to do?
So under the Peraton agreement, we set up a series of needs packages that clearly articulate what the work streams are and the estimated timeline to completion. Peraton's profit, if we want to think about that, is essentially broken into three different elements. There's a fixed profit element of 3%, and then there's a variable profitable element of 6%. The 6% variable profitability element is contingent upon completing the plan on budget and on time with our satisfaction. And we will hold back 3% of the potential profits for any potential damages that might happen for failure to comply with our work packages. So it's a very strenuous agreement, and we have vigilant oversight on it.
An element of this modernization effort is radar system replacement. Replacement of the aging surveillance radars for modern, reliable, and interoperable systems. Your agency is working to replace up to 612 systems by June 2028. What's an update to this, the aspect of this modernization effort? What's the timeline awarding a contract that you're working to meet?
Well, thank you for the question. Yes, we're very close. We've down selected 3 qualified vendors. We've tested their equipment. We will probably award over the next 2 weeks a contract to potentially 2 of those suppliers in order to meet our timelines. So I believe we will have that money committed by the end of the year, and we will begin installations in second quarter of 2026.
Tell me about the Common Automation Platform, CAP, Next Generation Single Unified Air Traffic Control System that handles both civil and military. Your request for information for the CAP indicates that, quote, the current NAS automation system infrastructure is siloed, inflexible, and increasingly costly to maintain. What mitigation efforts is the FAA considering to make certain that CAP will be implemented both safely, affordably, and on time, consistent with the objectives of the administration?
Well, this would certainly be worthy of a much longer dialogue, but let me try to explain it as straightforward as I can. So we have 350 different FAA facilities. We might think of the 130-ish TRACONs and the 22 en route centers and the rest are towers, but each one of these FAA facilities has its own compute power. So, and this compute power also has an operating system. If it's a tower or a TRACON, it has a STARS application. If it's an en route center, it has an ERAMS application. In order to be successful, that next tranche of funding that we're requesting will enable us to actually re-architect those systems so that we can lift them out of the local compute power and into the cloud. And as we get that architecture into the cloud, we essentially have unlimited compute power. That will give us the ability to surveil the NAS as a consolidated system, where today we surveil it as 350 separate systems. And every time a plane transitions from one system to another, it requires a human handoff and a tactical deconfliction. We actually will be able, once we get the system in the cloud, we'll be able to strategically deconflict flights before they even leave the ground, giving us greater efficiency, greater safety, and greater surveillance.
It is worthy probably of a longer conversation, and one in which I can think more clearly about what you're telling me, but
It
what
will be
a massive,
amazing.
significant undertaking.
It will return us to the gold standard in the world.
It's great to hear. Just a couple of other things, and then I'll conclude the hearing. We have a number of air traffic control towers that are, the personnel are contract tower personnel.
Yes, sir.
It's an important component of air traffic control in states like Kansas, I think, and in Illinois as well. Section 611 of the FAA Reauthorization Act of 2024 requires the FAA to work with the Department of Labor to update wage determinations for controllers and create a new wage determination category or occupation code for air traffic managers at contract towers. And a report on that is due to Congress in 6 months. Would you be able to tell me about implementation of that requirement and where you are and where you're headed?
Well, I'm going to be honest with you and tell you I don't specifically know that one. I know we've got the 339 specific reauth requirements we have. 75% of them are done. The other 25% are in work. But I can talk to you about our thoughts on the federal contract tower program, just not that specific element.
Well, I've accomplished my goal.
You've
Get to
planted
your
the seed.
attention, but anything
We
you'd
will
like-
get it done.
Anything you want to tell me about contract towers?
Well, so we also have an obligation to assess the towers to see whether or not we should bring them into the federal tower program. We are doing that work. I think we're close to identifying the first potential transitions. We also have a focus on increasing the staff availability at our our contract tower programs. We're allowing now our collegiate trained controllers to be able to report to duty at a contract tower to help supplement their workforce standing. If you think we're shorthanded in the federal towers, we're even more shorthanded in the contract towers. So we are aware we need to supplement them and to help them, and ultimately the larger ones will convert to federal towers.
Final question, I believe. In addition to modernizing air traffic control systems, I also want to ask about what more can be done to improve aircraft certification processes. We are a significant manufacturer of aircraft. The policies that would allow for more rapid certification and deployment of safety enhancements on the aircraft. So sometimes this sort of self-certification and this certification process is considered, there's safety concerns raised by people. In this case, how do you get the certification done to get the safety devices into the manufacturing process?
Well, thank you for that question. I couldn't agree more. This is an area of significant focus for the FAA right now. We've got so many certification programs going on between advanced air mobility, supersonic, and of course we do a lot of work in space, you may have heard. So this is probably an area where I would admit we're resource challenged, and we could do some extra hands there. But the team is focused on it. We're bringing a theory of constraints mentality to look at bottlenecks in the certification process and how we can be more collaborative, but also improve our oversight and surveillance. So there's a lot of work to do there.
Senator Duckworth, anything to conclude? Very good. Administrator Bedford, again, I think I've thanked you 6 times. Thank you.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Senators will have until the close of business on Friday, December the 19th, to submit questions for the record. In other words, there could be written questions coming your direction. The witness, Mr. Bedford, you will have until the close of business on January 7th to respond to those questions. And with that, the hearing is concluded.
Thank you.
Good hearing.
Thanks.